Quick fact, before we get started, I've been gaming since the early 80s, as far back as the Atari 2600. Still own quite a few Atari cartridges as a matter of fact. I'm a huge player, but an even bigger collector. So, although I haven't created many of these retro and top list videos, I'll be putting up a bunch more in the near future. I've got an incredibly huge collection from past to present, so why the hell not? The Sega Dreamcast was released in Japan in November 1998, then in September and October of 1999 in the US and Europe. I was in a rush to get mine, so I picked up a Japanese version earlier in 1999. I've been a Sega fan since the Master System. I actually got a Master System before I got the NES, so I was a die-hard Sega supporter from the get-go. There were a lot of games on the Dreamcast that brings back crazy nostalgia. Here are my top 20 favorite Sega Dreamcast games, in no specific order. Blue Stinger. Released in 1999, Blue Stinger was the first title I picked up for the Dreamcast. Now while the Japan version was plagued with a terrible camera, among other things, I love this game. Maybe it was the excitement associated with owning a new console, because in hindsight, this game really wasn't that great. One of the things that bothered me the most about Blue Stinger was the inability to move while reloading. But it still makes it to my top 20 because, although I wouldn't seriously enjoy it today, I certainly did in 1999.
What a joke.
Dead or Alive 2, released February 29, 2000. This is the game that got me hooked on the DOA series. I had the original DOA on the PlayStation, but even for the time it looked bad. Didn't appeal to me at all. Dead or Alive 2, however, on the shiny new Dreamcast was revolutionary. From the graphics to the controls and other little extras like being able to kick your opponent to the next level of the stage was amazing at the time. DOA 2 deserves its spot on this list.
Winner!
Another import. Dynamite Deka 2, known in the US as Dynamite Cop 2, was another of my favorites. This was a beat 'em up where you could choose from 3 characters. I always chose the female character, however. She had this badass Cynthia Rothrock style kick that impressed me every time she did it. The story was that a terrorist group kidnapped the president's daughter on a ship, and it was your job to go set them straight. Another one from the Dreamcast library that's in my good books.
We have to invade the ship, clear the pirates, and rescue the hostages, especially the president's daughter.
Giant Gram All Japan Pro Wrestling 2, released on the Dreamcast June 24th, 1999. This import-only title was one of the only wrestling games I remember having a good time with for that generation. Although I couldn't understand most of what was written and had to be guessing my way through the menus, it was great to have a wrestling game that also had my favorite Virtua Fighter characters in it.
青コーナー265ポンドジェフリー・マクワイルド何回止まったん
Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes.
Released June 29th, 2000, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 has to be one of the most memorable fighters I played on the Dreamcast. I later got it on the PS2, but all that nostalgia is still attached to the Dreamcast version. I played this version till the disc barely worked. I had hell trying to get it up and running for this video. With an insane lineup of 56 characters from both the Marvel and Capcom universe, this fighter had me up night after night playing till the wee hours of the morning.
You win.
Spoil sport.
Released October 2000, Ready to Rumble was another fighting game that I spent hours on end playing. The Ready to Rumble series brought an interesting twist to both fighters and the boxing genre. There were cartoon-style characters with their own brand of special moves. Every character had their own personality and style. None seemed like a cut-and-paste job like, let's say, Ryu, Ken, and Akuma. To this day, some may argue that Resident Evil Code Veronica is one of the best Resident Evil games ever made, with amazing graphics at the time and an epic story. Released February 24th, 2000, Code Veronica came bundled on 2 discs and completely absorbed a huge chunk of my time back in 2000. There was a time in my gaming history that I was neck deep into racing games. Today, not so much, but the Dreamcast was home to some of my all-time favorites. Released August 29th, 2000, Sega GT was the first official driving simulator for the Dreamcast. I never got into the Gran Turismo craze, but when I found this sim that allowed you to customize your ride from ground up or choose from a host of more than 100 GT racers, I was hooked. Played this all the way to the end of the main campaign and then some. Released in the US on Halloween 1999, and coming from the PS1 generation, I was amazed at these visuals. The controls, as with many rally racers at the time, were floaty, not what I was used to with the regular tarmac races, but I was still amazed and hooked. Sega Rally 2 seemed extremely challenging at the time, but even now, capturing this footage, it still gave me a warm time. A great classic nonetheless. Now on November 7th, 2000, an epic exclusive was born. Shenmue to this day has cemented its place as one of the most unique, groundbreaking titles ever made. Now, people have yet to know exactly what genre to classify this game as. Is it an RPG? Is it action-adventure? It's really in a class by itself. At the time, it also boasted being a 4D game because of the way time was handled. Truly a masterpiece. Later, Shenmue 2 came to the original Xbox, but for some reason, that's a game that stacks high in my pile of shame as I never played it. Maybe at the time, being the Sega zealot I was, it just didn't feel right that such a huge franchise was ported to a platform other than Sega.
A letter for Hazuki-sensei.
Soul Calibur.
Now, anybody who was doing any serious gaming anytime before 2000 knows that whether or not you owned or even respected the Dreamcast, Soul Calibur was the fighter to play. This game came out the gate with guns blazing. This had to be one of the Dreamcast's biggest titles and a system seller. Graphics, gameplay, and controls at this level were unheard of. Now, back in 1995, I had Soul Blade for the PS1, and although I liked it, a lot more than Dead or Alive 1 I might add, it still did not in any way prepare me for Soul Calibur. Namco knocked it out of the park with this fighter in 1999. It was October the 14th, 1999 when Ubisoft released this little under-the-radar racer called Speed Devils. Speed Devils is a game I started playing and could not put down until the credits for the main campaign rolled. With its arcade-style gameplay and controls, simple story but addictive gameplay, and what at the time I thought were some beautiful visuals, this ended up being another racer on the Dreamcast that received high praises from me.
Streetfighter 3.
Capcom released this on June 19th, 2000. Now, Capcom has a reputation as a dev who counts real slow. So after years of playing the many versions and derivatives of Street Fighter 2, gamers were way too excited about Part 3 to take it lightly. All the excitement was warranted and did not lead to disappointment. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Street Fighter 5. Double Impact came bundled with New Generation and Second Impact. This is where I first saw fighters like Ibuki and Alex. Parrying was also a new addition to the series. Street Fighter 3, although not the most loved or popular in the series, was greatly appreciated.
Streetfighter Alpha 3.
No, still on Street Fighter. The Alpha series was one of my favorite of all the Street Fighter iterations, and Street Fighter Alpha 3, released for the Dreamcast May 31st, 2000, was, and probably when I think about it, still is my favorite Street Fighter game ever made. Even though the Dreamcast controller wasn't ideal for fighting games, or any genre for that matter, I think I can safely say I had some of my best days playing fighting games on the Dreamcast. Street Fighter Alpha 3 was a true and real definition of the term fast and furious. There was no Street Fighter game at the time that could top this, and to this day, it's still a contender. I still play the PSP version every once in a while. Now, I've always been a fan of superbikes, even owned one back in the 90s. I've since then outgrown my interest in riding these rockets, but I still love me a good bike racing game. I recently got Ride for the PC and this serves me well, but back in the 90s, what I had was Suzuki Alstare Extreme Racing for the Dreamcast. Released November 16, 1999, this was a racer that had me glued to the Dreamcast day in day out. With what I considered to be great controls, visuals and bike selection back then, this was definitely a keeper, and a great addition to the collection.
An outcast warrior enters a land plagued by an evil fate.
Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage, based off an actual anime I knew nothing about at the time, was one of my favorite action hack-and-slash games for the Dreamcast. It had a twisted yet interesting story that kept my attention long enough to complete this game twice, back to back actually. After you complete the game the first time, you're given the perk of invulnerability, so I took that opportunity to run through it again. It was just that good. Another Dreamcast exclusive released February 29th, 2000. This was and still is a valuable part of my collection.
Are you mercenaries? If so, you're strange ones.
Another racer, Test Drive 6 was released on the Dreamcast November 30th, 1999. Now I've realized that although I absolutely loved this game back then, it wasn't faring too well with the gaming community. Guess that's just me, always rooting for the underdog. Now, while this game, even at the time, wasn't visually impressive and also hard as nails, it was also addictive. I played this game till the very end. It was an extremely fast-paced and unforgiving racer, but the feeling you got after coming out on top after a grueling race was like no other. Felt like the king of the tracks.
The House of the Dead.
The House of the Dead 2, awful acting and all, is another classic. Playing this game on the Dreamcast with a light gun or two light guns was an experience like no other. In 1999, these were great visuals coupled with a high fun factor. Hours could easily fly by while playing House of the Dead 2. A difficult game in my opinion, but still difficult to put down.
James! Amy! Harry!
Virtua Fighter 3 TV or Team Battle was released for the Dreamcast on my birthday, October 18th, 1999. Was and still is one of my favorite fighting games. Famous for being not too button smasher friendly, this game was best suited for tacticians, players with patience and skill. I'm not saying a button smasher couldn't have their day with this, but it was easier to get around a button smasher in Virtua Fighter than, let's say, a Tekken. I hope one day we see a refined version of Virtua Fighter on current gen hardware. I'd also love to see this at one of our Jamaican esports events. This game, Zombie Revenge, released on the Dreamcast December 31st, 1999, was an experience to remember. Now, while it's basically just another beat-em-up, similar to Dynamite Deka 2, at the time beat-em-ups were still more acceptable. We weren't tired of them just yet, so another game where you go around bashing heads of the undead even was a welcome addition. I particularly loved the way the announcer would say bullet. I don't know, just something about it.
Bullets. Bullets.
Well, these are my top 20 Dreamcast games. There are a lot more Dreamcast games that I own and love, but these in no particular order are the most memorable. If you're from the old school like myself and lived through this generation of gaming, sound off in the comments section on which Dreamcast game kept you busy in the late 90s, early 2000s. The life of this console was premature to say the least, but while it lived, it was quite a ride. Share and subscribe, and if you like the video for whatever reason, leave a thumbs up. If it pissed you off for some reason, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, thanks for watching, and thanks for playing.